I'm aware that children who have care experience are very vulnerable in terms of county lines. Can you explain to us how vulnerable they are and what you're aware of?
Yeah, of course. So sadly, we're seeing if you're care experienced, you're much more likely to end up being involved in county lines, often as a victim of exploitation. And the sad fact is that of all the children that were referred to the London's Rescue and Response Service, which is a charity that helps children to exit county lines and provides support for those that have experienced county lines. Of all the referrals that went into that service, we've seen about 60% to 60% of those children are care experienced. So for people in the care system, this is a considerable concern, because it means that sadly, because of the environment you're growing up in, you're more likely to be involved in what is an awful method of drug supply. It's one of the most violent forms of drug supply. It's a mechanism where people are exploiting children and causing them significant harm so that they can put them into the riskiest positions in that drug supply business to sell the drugs. And then you have much older people, typically men, typically really violent people. People are often kind of well known to police, but then will use whatever means is necessary to further their illegal business, and in doing so put children into the riskiest positions to actually be at the forefront of the drug supply, and they themselves would then step back, control the supply to the market, but do it in a way where they're sort of out of what they consider to be harm. So they're not carrying the drugs, they're not carrying the weapons, they're not holding the cash and making the sales. And those are positions where if someone wanted to attack the business, take over territory, steal commodity, and where you see those violent flashpoints, that's the position that we've got children in. So this is something that it's really important that we do all we can to prevent.
So you use the word business there, and I think that's the problem with vulnerable children, is that they think it's some kind of a glamorous life. They don't realise that it's a very hard-nosed business at which their life will be at risk.
Yes, of course, and what we're talking about here, there is how children are groomed and recruited into a business and a lifestyle that they think is something that they may want to be part of. If they're particularly in the care system, perhaps if they don't feel like they've got the support network around them, if they don't feel like they've got someone they can trust or confide in, then criminal gangs will prey on that. They'll be the people that they think they can look up to, people they think they can trust in, and then they'll then be drawn in and recruited to go and work on these drugs lines. And then we often see then thereafter some debt bondage. So we see criminal gangs employ tactics where they will have a young person who is effectively robbed of the drugs or robbed of the cash or both. And that's a situation that's engineered by the criminal gangs, and that creates a debt, and then they have to continue to work, often for free or for very little recompense, for the criminal gang to continue to sell and supply drugs. And of course they're then trapped in county lines, and that's how we see the start of a cycle. And if we don't break that cycle, what can happen is the person can become more entrenched, the violence, the exploitation becomes normal, and then it can escalate, and again that behaviour then becomes normalised, and we see the more time you spend in that criminal gang, in that drug enterprise, sort of supplying drugs in county lines, it can become ever more difficult to escape and to move on to a more positive life pathway.
So what actually needs to be done? Do you have a goal or a vision of what would be ideal to protect children?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we need to do is we need to take a whole system response to do all we can to prevent county lines happening. That's a key part of our policing strategy, and we do all we can to prevent them happening in the first place, to make communities, parents, carers aware of the risk factors so we can see and understand what exploitation looks like, what recruitment and grooming looks like, what county lines are. And then those are the opportunities where people can intervene at the earliest point and seek specialist support, specialist safeguarding from those experts who are best able, maybe people with lived experience, people who can talk to what it's like so that a young person can realise this isn't the life for them and help them to steer away. And then thereafter, what we want to do is make sure that we have a clear focus on children, putting them first, doing all we can to protect them and safeguard them, as well as criminal adults who are also vulnerable and exploited within this. And then thereafter, we as police will pursue offenders, mostly adults, and make sure that we do all we can to shut the drugs lines and prevent that opportunity almost for someone to be drawn in and exploited in a drugs market. So, and that involves specialist police officers who understand what exploitation looks like and who can respond properly, understand what trauma sits behind why a young person might be involved in this, and then make sure we kind of go after those people and shut the lines.
And finally, why do you think a conference like this, an event like this, is important?
I think it's really important that we have the kind of One Voice Summit led by Fatima Whitbread to make sure that we raise awareness of the issues, make sure we raise people's knowledge and understanding of what this is, what County Lines is, but also the negative experiences more often for those from care, and how what we need to do is there's particular groups of people, for example here in this conference for care experienced, who are suffering more than others, and so we need to put more effort, more energy and more expertise into doing all we can to make lives better for those people.